I'm Meredith Banka, your co-host of Faith Infused Leadership, here with Debbie Heiser for another episode of this fantastic podcast. And I'm so thrilled that we're talking today, Debbie, about how can we develop better people when it comes to employees, and how does that impact us as leaders? What an awesome topic.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, especially after the last one that we talked about when we talked about how you need to lead from your mind and your heart and your spirit, because it leads right into this topic then of how do I develop my people to not only do the job that they're hired for, but develop them just as humans. Mm-hmm. And so understanding that in order to develop people, you really have to know them. And so that's why a lot of people like you and I, we do client intake forms, and we have them fill out, their name, and they all vary, but it may have their birth date on it, not necessarily the year, but just the month and date. It may have like their spouses and children, so on and so forth, depending on the type of work you do. And that's the tool I wanted to share a little bit too with, as a leader, it's really important to know your people. And so you almost have to do like a client intake form and find out like, what is their favorite color? What's their favorite candy bar? So if you have something that they do great, you can lay a little note with a candy bar on it. I used to a lot of times buy those 100 grand bars and say, you're worth 100 grand. Thanks for this. But if you can customize even recognition, and a way to do that is just get to know your people. Mm-hmm. Find out, do they like coffee? Do they like Starbucks? What's their favorite place to shop? What's their favorite book? Or, just kind of some information about them to start that process of getting to know them. And then throughout time, making notes to those. I've started using an app called Good Notes that I can then create little notebooks and do some of that with my clients. And I used to have managers or leaders just take a piece of paper and just do it with their employees to get to know them, so that they, back in the day, didn't have such great technology. But, just to have that there. And so when we talk about developing people, it kind of goes back to that understanding the people that work for you and work with you, so that you can then make sure that you're leading appropriately to them. So
let me ask you, where does trust in the workplace come into play then? Right. I mean, I can see like somebody's really willing to tell you like, oh yeah, I love Twix bars. Like if you want to leave me a candy, leave me a Twix, or no, I don't eat chocolate. I mean, that's not too deep. But I can see that this could go down a path where if you really want to know someone, you need to be developing an environment of trust. So
absolutely.
How do managers do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it starts with those surface level questions. There's questions out there that someone did a research project. There's 36 questions that if you ask these questions, you'll get to know someone better than you know your best friend. And it starts out the same way with surface level questions. Then it digs a little deeper, and then it goes really in depth. Same thing holds true when you're leading people. So you start there. The other piece you do is create a safe environment. I've mentioned before that 2 of my big value orientations were honesty and integrity. The great thing is that the corporation that I worked for had just what they called planned or unplanned days. And then one corporation just had time off. And it didn't matter. You didn't have to call and tell me all your ails, if you were sick, or if you weren't and you were just faking it to get the day off, And so I would always tell people too, tell me what I need to know, but you don't have to tell me the whole story unless you want to. It's like creating that safe environment, and also realizing that there were times that you would say to someone, this is a safe environment, and I need for you to understand that it's a safe environment. But then you have to be willing to know that then whatever safe environment you've explained to them is being created there, you have to stick with that. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be really conscious, particularly if you're working in a corporation, because if you find out information from them that's going to have an impact on the corporation, you also have a responsibility and a duty as an officer to make sure that you bring that to the right people. So you have to be it's an art and a science, which leadership is an art and a science. There's a really good book out there called Leadership Jazz and Leadership is an Art that talks to that. But that trust building comes with, if you say you're going to do something, you follow up on it. That you acknowledge people. You don't I'm a firm believer that if you focus on the bottom line, you'll get stressed out and the bottom line will never move in the direction you want it to move. If
Mm-hmm.
you're focused on, and it goes back to my three-legged stool, but if you're focused on what the job is, like when I was in sales, I thought if I focused on helping my people, the good intention of making sure that they had what they needed out of our product and service, the numbers would happen. And sure enough, that happens. It doesn't mean that I never think about the numbers. The same thing holds true with developing people, and it's that holistic approach again. And so part of it too on that intake form and building trust is finding out from them too, what do you want out of your career here? This is a nationwide problem though too, Meredith, because there has been a culture shift in, and I'm not, it's not a generational thing. It's a cultural shift that has occurred, that people do not stay at one job anymore. Even if they really like the job, they're skipping every 2 or 3 years to another one because it looks better on a resume. Where when I started, if you skip jobs, that was a red flag, and that resume never even made it to my desk. And so there is this culture change that's happening, and it's more important now even than ever for us to know the people that are working for us, because if we're investing in them, then chances are high that they'll stay with us longer than they would if we weren't investing in them.
Sure. And that's driving cost, right? Having people shift jobs regardless of industry, regardless of expertise or level of employment. It's expensive hiring people. That's an expensive process.
Absolutely.
Training people. And so that's definitely making an impact. And a few minutes ago, one of the things you were talking about, that it's this concept of consciousness and leadership, right? And I can remember being a really new manager and thinking to myself, like, wow, I didn't realize how much of this success was, how I would couch it, is just in being a good human.
Yeah.
Right. In paying attention and being invested in the relationships with my employees. And I think that's one of the things that I'd love to infuse in new managers, is a huge piece of your success is being a good human and getting to know these people.
Absolutely. Well, we're human beings, right?
Right.
And so, and you know, it's interesting. I don't remember off the top of my head, and I actually was looking for this book and I've loaned it to someone and I can't find it in my bookshelf, but there's a book that, there's a couple of them done by these authors that have done some Gallup research, and they did research around why people stay in a job or why people leave a job. And interestingly enough, a lot of times when I would train new leaders, or I would train even existing leaders that have been around for a long time, including executives, when I would say, what do you think is the number one thing that motivates people to stay in a job? Inevitably, most of them would say money. And that is not the number one reason, nor is it the number one reason people leave a job. So there's a couple of entities that happen with creating this safe environment. One of them is, to your point earlier, it's about the manager. Like one of the top 5 reasons people leave a job is because of the manager. And one of the top 5 reasons people stay in a job is because of the manager or the leader. And so, and I see that happening all over the place. All over the place. The other thing, it's interesting, I was talking to a good friend of mine who's retired. So you're talking a couple of, generations ago. And when I was in a company, the first company I worked for, we worked hard and we played hard together. We were family. And we don't see that as much anymore, because it seems like Wall Street has played a big important role. Small businesses are struggling in the day-to-day grind to make things happen. But we've taken away that human element where we get to know each other as people. And I mean, I'll tell you, the company I worked for in the beginning, they'll have a happy hour every once in a while and 70 people will show up. I mean, and this is a company that we haven't worked for in decades.
Right.
And, and so we're missing that in our companies today, in our small businesses today, in solopreneurs that have created a smaller business. It's so important to understand and know those people, and then also bringing the family in the fold. And I know some people are going to think I'm absolutely nuts. But there are many, many examples of companies out there that don't do this, that end up either not being as successful as they could be or out of business.
And I, as a manager, how can you help someone get comfortable with showing themselves holistically? Because I know as a manager, I was also afraid, like, I don't want to engage in too personal of a relationship with Debbie because maybe someday I'm going to have to fire her or, you know, lay her off. Or so I think there's a hesitancy, almost a fear based on the manager of opening themselves up and being vulnerable
Yeah.
because of what they think might happen.
Yeah. And so, Meredith, I'm going to sound a little bit like I'm talking out of both sides of my tongue here. So bear with me here for a second. So the important thing is to create a family. Now, being a leader is also a little bit lonely because you do have to be conscious of building relationships with people, opening up to people to a certain extent, but realizing that those relationships need to be, when I say similar, like you don't want to put an employee in the position of someone saying they're a favorite, saying that they got some type of reward because you favored them. And so you do have to realize there is a line that you need to have there and think about. But it's about building that team to see themselves as family, and you're a part of that family, but not the whole string that holds it together. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. For sure. I mean, I think what you're encouraging is that there is a line, right? It's not like there's no line. There is still a line to be crossed. You're saying that line is just simply in a more appropriate position that's allowing for trust to be created and relationships to be built.
Correct. And you know, I'm still amazed that I got so many accolades about this, but numerous times actually in my career. But the first time I did this, people were like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you did this. This was so wonderful." And it was during a really tough period that we had where people were working long hours. We had something going on, and I don't even remember what the situation was. And I wrote their spouses, or if they didn't have a spouse and they were a single parent, I wrote their kids a note and said, thank you for supporting them during this, 6-week period when it's been rough. And just know that we appreciate it. And to me, that's the part about leading with your heart and your spirit. And then looking at that, because then when I go to develop people, then they know that my intention is to help them. And when I look at developing people, it's about knowing them, but it's also about knowing what their aspirations are. What are their dreams? I've been in situations where we had trainers that wanted to be a nurse and they were going to college to be a nurse, but they stuck with us for 6 years while they were getting their degree and trained for 6 years, and we had them as a great employee.
So let me ask you something there. What about in situations where maybe higher management is encouraging retention, encouraging those things, and here you are, this manager, knowing that you have this person whose ultimate goal is to not have your job or to not even stay with the company? How do you bring all of that into balance when there are pressures then to maybe only have people that want to take the next step or who want to move forward and stay with that company?
Yeah, I think we make a grave mistake thinking everybody wants to be president and CEO of the company, right? And promoting them regardless of whether or not that's what they want. And I've seen a lot of really good people ruined by that, and a lot of companies suffer. So that is my first piece of advice. Have some managerial courage to talk about it with those people. I don't mean the people that you're leading, but the people that are your leaders. And then I think too, it's about realizing that someone may say they don't want people on their team like that, or the company may say we don't want people that we know are going to leave in 6 years. Well, they're going to leave anyway. So why don't we keep them for 6 years if they're a good employee and they're doing a really good job and are promoting teamwork and all of these things that we're looking for? A lot can change in 6 years. It's not a guarantee that they're going to leave, but why cut them out now when we could have 6 years where they're part of our organization? Like, to me, it's just about then coming to them with some logic and showing the heart space and the soul space with logic. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, I think it does. It may not be well received. Right. It may not be what is, that group would want to necessarily hear, but I think that there's huge truth in that. And it does require courage to say that to your higher ups.
Absolutely. And I will say too, Meredith, there were a lot of things that I knew about my people that my manager never knew about. And that's that's normal. And I'm not saying keep important information. If they want to know what we, you know, if you're doing some succession planning and you're talking about the long-term sustainability of someone, you know, then absolutely that conversation should come up. But I paint the picture of who the people are that are working for me with the people that I'm reporting to. And so it's important to make sure that you give an accurate description of that too, and be conscious of what you're sharing.
So this also, all that you've shared with us so far today implies that I cannot take a cookie cutter approach as a manager to the group that I am managing, that I can be fair without having to be, I don't want to say equitable, but without treating everyone identically.
Absolutely. And that's a big piece that people get really nervous about, because you hear all the time from HR departments, everybody needs to be consistent. It needs to be a consistent way that you approach it. It's the consistent way you approach it, meaning give everyone opportunities to be developed, but you're going to give them different opportunities. Because if you have one person that you are grooming to teach leadership skills to, you're going to put them in opportunities or give them opportunities to lead things or learn leadership. If you have someone, let's say they're in sales and they want to become, you know, part of the marketing team to help create content about how great the product is, then I'm not going to teach them leadership skills necessarily. I'm going to teach, I mean, everybody could use good leadership skills, but, you know, I'm going to actually give them some opportunities to interact more with the marketing department or create some content to market our department, or, you know, build those skills to help them move into a different position. And it may or may not be a move up, it could be a lateral move. But it's really then about understanding, again, those people so that you can develop them the right way. The other thing I really highly recommend to leaders is to list out each of your people and what opportunities you've been giving them. Because many times in corporate life anyway, we would have teams of people that would get together to solve certain things, and you can stack some people and not even realize you're stacking them with all this extra development, and then not giving opportunities to other people too. So it's important that you kind of track that so that you know and have a pretty good idea then that you are treating people equitably, but different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this has been a wealth of information around developing people, and I so appreciate all your insights. If someone were curious and wanted to know a little bit more, could they contact you, or where would they go to get some more information about this topic?
Yeah, thank you. You can go out to my website at www.3VasInVictorConsulting.com and press on that free consultation. I'd love to have more conversation with someone around this. And again, look at my blog, and there is a place where you can download a free ebook and be placed on my email list so that you can receive blogs more frequently, as well as these videos. So.
Yeah, taking advantage of that free consultation seems like a fantastic idea to me, Debbie. So I'm so glad you shared that with everyone. And for this episode of Faith Infused Leadership, it's been our pleasure. I'm Meredith Banker, your co-host, and Debbie Heiser, your host. We'll see you the next time.
Everybody have a great week.